Chicago had a bloody weekend again this past 4th of July. According to the Chicago Tribune, 82 shootings, 14 dead for the long weekend, and that is truly amazing. Folks, I'm profoundly saddened by the war zone Chicago has become. I grew up in the city of Chicago. I remember being able to leave our front door unlocked to go to a park day or night, and I never, ever felt unsafe. But that was many years ago. Since then, Chicago has elected a series of liberal Democrat mayors, councilmen, and city bosses who have pushed for tougher and tougher gun laws in that city. Coincidence? Not a chance. Here's how Mayor Rahm Emanuel, liberal and former Obama advisor, sums it up. He says, quote, "The number of shootings and murders that took place over the holiday weekend is simply unacceptable. The solution does not just include policing. This violence is unacceptable wherever it occurs in our city, and all of us need to take a stand. The only way we will meet this challenge to our future is to join with one another and create a, quote, partnership for peace." KG, let's talk about this for a second. The Daily Beast really nailed it, and they called it Chirac over this weekend.
It's really sad and terrible because actually I've learned that Chicago is the only good place with single men left, so they really should do something to clean it up. But on a serious note, as a prosecutor, this is unacceptable. Chicago used to be
argument to end violence.
Really? Wow.
And where did you get this at? You told me that. And then Genevieve said it. That's the only way I know. But besides, it sounded believable.
Wow.
Genevieve told me, and then I told Kimberly.
But besides that, so as a prosecutor, my point is, it's Chicago. Okay, this is the town that Obama built, and then he left his buddy in charge, and now his buddy's got as bad polling numbers as he does, and everybody's dying, and the liberals aren't doing anything about it.
Greg, on a sub note, there may have been 4 more deaths in Chicago, but a military member walked out of a party with 3 other people. He was confronted by someone. There was an argument. The guy went back in his room, in his apartment, pulled out a gun, and the military guy said, "No way," and he shot him back. So we may have more. Is it time to rethink the gun laws in Chicago?
Well, I mean, violence in Chicago is so bad that the parents are thinking about sending their kids to the border. What do we know reduces gun crime? Enforcing existing gun laws, putting violators behind bars, and keeping them there. A lot of these people that get out and they commit crime aren't supposed to be on the street. It's not the guns, it's the judges. They got to enforce these laws.
They're not.
And they're not. And I think, you know, the one thing I got to say about Chicago, this still is the low. I mean, it's I think the lowest murder rate they've had in decades. A lot of that has to do with the fact that they started getting really bad press. When we started covering it, I don't know, months ago?
Well, no, almost
a year ago.
2 years ago. They had 507 or so murders.
Yeah.
Last year, it dropped down in the 4s. This year, you're right. Is on schedule to be even less. However, they're still higher versus other cities.
But they got people from New York to come and help them out. I mean, they looked at what New York was doing.
But these stats are all misleading. So they love to go out and tout how the murder rate has gone down. The Chicago superintendent, police superintendent Gary McCarthy, on Friday was on local Chicago Fox saying, yes, the murder rate has gone down. But here's why these guys are full of BS, okay? They keep fudging the numbers. They're not counting the murder rate. They're talking about homicides, but they're not talking about shooting incidents. So what they're saying is Chicago, if you look at the stats, the Chicago Tribune says there's been over 1,100 people shot, shooting victims. Healthcare has gotten so much better that they can go to the hospitals, technology,
and live.
And they can live. So oftentimes you'll hear people say, well, we've only had 14 people murdered, but 82 were actually shot and killed. The big thing, though, here is in Chicago, they keep talking about homicides. You have 171 versus 180 murders. That's not exactly something, one, to pat yourself on the back about, and two, it's because, what, the shooters are missing their targets?
Well, it's filled with bad shooters.
I want to get a really important question. Can you just point one thing out? In Chicago, the murder rate is down, but it's down to a number around 13 or 14 per 100,000, and that's almost double the national average.
All right, let me just say
per
Blacks
capita.
and Hispanics.
I want to let me.
96%
I'm going to tell you.
murders.
I was going to say this. Look, it's I mean, what you're talking about here is young Black and Hispanic men.
Yes.
And what you're talking about is, where is the NAACP marching in the street about this issue?
Yes.
Where are the churches? Where are the Black churches? You know, this is about drugs and drug dealers and attitude and a community that is just imploding, and yet nobody wants to call it out. And I would say, where's Sharpton? Where's Jackson? You don't see them on this issue. And I disagree with you about the guns. You know, I live in the middle of Washington, D.C. The biggest threat to my life? Guns held by these same gangbangers
do you
when
have
I'm
one?
walking down it. No,
Well, then
let me just tell you something.
Your
There are
risk
too
of
many
dying
guns.
at
The easy
business
access.
end of a gun will go down if you own your own.
Let me just tell you something. It's these punks with the guns that threaten my life, Eric. I don't think it's good to have guns in every corner of the society, walking into the Starbucks. That's
But they have the
ridiculous.
tightest
guys
gun,
have
tightest
it.
gun
That's the
control.
problem.
Gun control does not stop gangs
No.
from getting guns.
Yeah, it
rather
sure
than-
doesn't, because the next
all.
state has easy access to guns. In Virginia, they're peddling guns
Yeah,
out the back of the truck, so go
They're sugarcoating
ahead.
the real statistics. They're not saying that they're calling them accidental shootings. They're not
Right.
being honest about the murder rate, which
They're
they have
fudging
to
the
report
stats.
to the FBI, by the way. So if they're giving them fraudulent data, Eric, to run this PR campaign to make them look better, they're actually ignoring what Juan said is the problem even more. They're not being honest about its actual shooting incidents.
Yeah,
not
well,
murders they
correct.
should
They're,
focus on.
they're perpetuating a fraud on the people of Chicago by trying to act like they're doing their job when they really aren't. Because if you look at the numbers, it clearly shows that they're not doing responsible government there. They're not approaching crime in the right way. And guess what? Yeah, there's people walking around with a bunch of bullet holes in them. That's
People are
progress.
scared.
We gotta go.
They have
We gotta go.
stuff
Up
on
next, what would you pay for an unmade bed with stained sheets, empty booze bottles, and dirty slippers? You're not going to believe how much this piece of so-called art sold for at auction. Find out when the 5 returns.